Joining us now on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline is Mike DeCourcy. He covers college hoops for, well, just about everybody, but Sporting News, Big Ten Network, Fox Sports as well. Mike, how are you this morning?
I am well this morning. How are you guys?
Good. Quick turnaround for you, Mike. Getting out of the studio last night, and I apologize for us getting you out of bed and ready to go, man.
No,
but I appreciate it.
I'm on my way home. So it's just fine.
Mike, so let's start with Nebraska basketball. Obviously, they finally got the road win against Indiana last week. They wrap up their week with a convincing win against Minnesota. I know you do some brackets as well. How confident are you in Nebraska being on the right side of the bubble this morning?
Oh, this morning, as confident as one could be. I would say certain is not an unfair description this morning. All they have to do is not do anything really awful now. And the problem for them is that losing most of what's left. They have 3 regular season games, and they probably shouldn't lose any of them. If they lost at Ohio State, it wouldn't be the worst because it is a quad 1 game, and Michigan State and Purdue have both lost that game in the last 8 days. So it wouldn't be the worst, but it would be nice for them to get a road win, another road win to add to that, and that would be a quad 1 road win, and it could do wonders for their seeding. But I think if they win the other 2, that should be less daunting than the trip to Ohio State. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think you win the games you can win, and they've done a really good job of just attacking the schedule that's in front of them. But like just for laughs and giggles, there's no real advantage. Let's say moving off the 10 line, right? I mean, you don't really want to be a 9. You don't want to be an 8 either. So it's like
you're not.
So unless you're going to jump to a 7, I feel like I'm okay with maybe a potential 10 seed, which is where I think smart guys like yourself have Nebraska probably currently, right?
Yes, there's absolute truth to that. Like I said, kind of the good news in that scenario is that if you do win those 3 games or 2 of the 3, you probably aren't moving up much anyway. I think I'm going to have them as a 9 in the seed list that I present today. I think I will, but it's going to be somewhere between those 2. I mean, you're like the last 9 of the first 10, and I can do a pretty good job of approximating them, but there are 10, 11 people in that room. You never know for sure how they're going to vote. But to me, there's no way at this stage that they would be left out. The way they're playing and how connected they are and how veteran they are and how tough-minded they are, I have a hard time seeing them lose 2 of the 3 or all 3 of the remaining regular season games.
Ravi and I were having a discussion earlier this morning, Mike, about how maybe even locally and certainly nationally, because just of the depth, the macro versus micro, Hoiberg should get a ton of credit for how he put this team together. They play with some joy. They like one another. The roles fluctuate. It's hard to pinpoint the guy, and they still seem to continue to evolve. Like, are we underselling the job he did putting this team together?
Oh, I hope not. I think he's a great candidate for Big Ten Coach of the Year.
There we go.
I think he's a really strong candidate. I'm not going to make any declarations. I don't vote for Big Ten Coach of the Year. I do vote through the AP for the all-conference teams, but I don't have a vote for Coach or Player of the Year. So I think the Player of the Year award's probably going to be pretty easy to figure, but the Coach of the Year, always a challenge to know exactly where that's going to go. But I think he's done an amazing job. I talked last night on Big Ten Basketball and Beyond and on some of our other shows about how this turnaround that has happened this year for Nebraska basketball really began last February. And I think I pinpointed it to February 11th that they won a game that Casey went off, and it really started to head in this direction, and they wound up winning 5 of their final 6 regular season games. And then they did bow out quickly in the Big Ten tournament, which was a little disappointing because they played so well. But that set this up. And then he added some really good pieces. And the beauty of this team, and what I really like about it, is that the pieces he added they were obviously given great consideration to how they would fit. It's not just, okay, he averaged 12 points a game and shot 40% from 3, so so we need him. No, it was more than that. It was, how is this player going to fit into what we want to be? And you don't see that very often, and you certainly don't see it work as often or as beautifully. Often you don't see it work as beautifully as it has for the Huskers this year.
I love how you I love how you kind of put that together, because we were talking this morning, and Juwan Gary, right? The evolution. Yeah, he's pretty underappreciated maybe on a national level. We love him here, but even a guy like my favorite that gets overlooked is a guy like Bryce. And Bryce, his temperament has to be complementary to how Nebraska plays. He's kind of a low maintenance, doesn't need a babysitter. He's an efficient guy. He's okay with us not talking about him a ton. Same as, like, let's say a Gary can evolve offensively when he knows. We used to only talk about his defense. Like, their ability to know who they are, I think, is grossly undervalued.
Yeah, I mean, they have great role definition, and what they do really well is that they find the weakness in the defense relative to what their particular strengths are. If it's a team that's going to be punished by Juwan getting in the lane and causing havoc, then that's sort of the emphasis for that game. And they don't have a true first option, but they also don't have a true fifth option. They don't have many rotations where you say, don't throw the ball at that guy. That's a real strength for this team. They can evolve according to what you don't do well. And yesterday, we've seen Rink Mass have some problems with dynamic shot blockers on occasion, guys like Cliff Amore and Julian Reese. And so with the way Pharrell Payne had been playing, it looked like a matchup that might be problematic. So what did they do? Well, they always set Rink at the top of the key because he can shoot from there, and because he can pass out of the post as well, or pass out of the high post. And so what they saw very quickly yesterday was that when he put the ball on the floor, Minnesota's defense became unraveled. Payne was not comfortable with that. And right away, his great physical strength and dynamism were muted because the ball was on the floor and it was moving. And that really opened up the offense for the Huskers. So there were there's just a lot of different ways that they can beat you. And there was that time when Casey had a tough stretch, and it coincided with the Huskers not playing as well. But they can go games now without Casey going for 20 or whatever. They still take it if he's on, and they'll still try to work it when it presents itself, because he's terrific. But if it's not there that night because the opposing defense has decided that's not how they're going to lose, then they can go away from it and they can still win.
We're talking with Mike DeCourcy of the Sporting News. Mike, you mentioned, you thought that the Big Ten Player of the Year is probably all wrapped up, and that makes sense. But let's take Zach Edey out of the discussion. Who have you been most impressed by on an individual basis from a Big Ten team this year?
Probably Boo Buie, because there's so much weight on him. It's a program that still has only made 2 NCAA tournaments in its history. And that is going to try to make the second consecutive NCAA tournament for the first time ever. They did not handle that opportunity well in 2018 because they came back with nearly everybody from the 17 team that not only got to the tournament but played really well once they were there. And then they kind of just regressed. So there was a lot of pressure on this team with bringing back, again, a lot, but not everybody from last year's season. And to try to back it up. And then after the Dayton win early, and then they played really well in the league early, and then it became apparent that it was possible. So there was a lot of pressure on Boo, a lot of weight, and he's stood up to it really beautifully. And then, of course, with the loss of Ty Berry a week or two ago, now it's back even more because they've got one less double-figure scoring option on a team that didn't have many. And he has handled that. They've gotten other guys to step up, Ryan Langborg in particular. But it still all falls to Boo beginning to end, and he's handled it just beautiful.
Mike, do you feel like if you had to cap a team, do you feel like you have a better handle on Illinois or Michigan State?
Oh, I don't understand Michigan State. I'll be frank. I don't. I don't understand them at all. Illinois, I don't have a hard time really understanding. I know what they are. They're a team full of dynamic. Basically, it's 5 dynamic wings. Just one of them happens to be 6'11", 6'10", and they play out of that. They don't have any real point guard, so one guy has to handle the ball at any particular time, and that player has to try to make plays. And they're all, Damask is very good at it. Shannon is very good at making plays for himself. He's not selfish, but he's not a creator. And of course, we've seen Coleman Hawkins do magical things for a 6'11" guy, 6'10" guy from that position, creating. Some of the passes he threw on Saturday in their victory were ridiculous. And some were just beautiful in terms of their awareness. But they have a lot of guys that can do that. And, Hawkins sometimes vexes me. His game against Penn State, I talked about
especially
it on
late
last night. Yeah, I mean, he made 3 massive errors in the final 35, 40 seconds, and 2 of them were totally avoidable, I should say, and the other was missing a couple of free throws, one of which might have won the game. But the mistakes he made in that game, and I'll give Brad Underwood a lot of credit. One, he made it clear to Coleman that you're a great player, you can't be doing these things, and Coleman responded with the best game of his career on Saturday. And then the other thing that I was really impressed by with Brad Underwood on Saturday was Nico Moretti came in early in the second half and played great.
He wrote it.
And instead of just saying, yeah, exactly. Instead of just saying, well, okay, we got some nice minutes out of Nico, let's go back to what we always do.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, and he never took him out.
Yeah.
I don't think he got a rest. I think he remained in the rotation in the lineup the entire rest of the game, and he played really solidly on defense. And he made a couple of shots, and he made a free throw, and they win the game. And I really respected that from Brad because I think sometimes coaches are, they go by what they've done always, and especially at this time of year, always doesn't get you as far as it can.
Mike, I'm curious about Purdue at the top of the league. Obviously, they've had a great regular season, bouncing back from their early tournament exit last year. They've got, the odds-on favorite for not just Big East Player of the Year, but National Player of the Year. Do you think they're constructed in a way that would allow them to make a run, at least give them a better chance for that than they had obviously last year?
Yeah, I think it's obvious the key to that is Lance Jones. He gives them a second ball handler. I won't go so far as to call Lance a creator, but Lance can get himself a shot. And he's a willing passer. If anybody's obviously open, he'll throw it to them when he gets on the move. But yeah, I don't think he's a true creator. But he, like I said, he'll make a play when it's obviously available because somebody overcommits to him. He is a consistent shooter. If you look at his season numbers, I haven't looked lately, but they're not overwhelming. But if you look since January 1, since we resumed Big Ten play, they're much better, which is impressive because there's no bye games in there. Mm-hmm. There's no easy games in there. It's all Big Ten competition. And his 3-point numbers are much better in that stretch. So I would suspect that will carry over into March. So I do think they are better constructed in that sense. Plus, Braden Smith is a year older as the point guard, and he's having a tremendous season. I still want to see better, more aggressive basketball out of Fletcher Lawyer. We saw more aggressive yesterday at Michigan, which was good. Still missed a couple of shots you'd like him to make, but he was willing to take them. He went through a stretch of 5 games in which he was 1 of 7 from 3. And I told Rayfel Davis on the set on Saturday, I said, I'm not bothered by the 1. I'm bothered by the 7. I mean, he was passing up open shots, and they just can't have that. They need the space that the threat of that shot provides. And if you're going to walk away from shots, then they're not going to honor them. They're just going to stay home and keep the ball from getting into Edie.
Mike, let me ask you on the national scale. Last week, kind of the question revolved around the worst team that could win a national championship in basketball. And let me phrase it a different way and kind of narrow it down about level of buy-in. If you had to decide today, like rapid fire, would you take Kansas or FAU?
Kansas or Florida Atlantic?
Yeah.
Like what, to win one game?
To advance, to make a run in March once the dance starts.
I'm not a big believer in Florida Atlantic. I think they had a nice run last year. It was a beautiful run, and what they achieved was singularly beautiful. But They should have not won their first game because the refs blew a timeout call. I don't know if you guys saw it, but
those T-shirts.
Those T-shirts were awesome. I loved it. It's the T-shirts, for those who weren't watching, said we called a timeout, because they were on the floor with the ball, try to call a timeout. The ref didn't grant it, and then they ended up in a tie-up, and the arrow favored Florida Atlantic, and they were able to conjure the winning basket. So Memphis is still bitter about that because FAU wound up in the Final Four, and Memphis had to go home after a game they said they might have won otherwise.
All right, Tennessee or Arizona?
I trust Tennessee more. I think they're much better offensively now that Dalton Connect is a part of their group. He's having a tremendous season. I've seen Caleb Love shoot teams in and out of games now for 3 years, and that's the reality.
I'm a diehard Carolina fan. That's why I chuckle.
Yeah, there you go. As well as anybody. I mean, honest to goodness, I can't remember whether it was I was at a regional or the Final Four last year, and on Friday, I think it was Armando Bacot announced he was coming back to Carolina, and on Saturday, R.J. Davis announced he was coming back to Carolina, and I said immediately, well, we know Caleb Love is leaving. We don't know anything.
All right, last one from me. And right aforementioned, Carolina or Duke?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. That really is.
Duke's freshmen are playing better. They kind of scare me now than the last week.
Yeah. Assuming Filipowski is healthy, I think that the offense, the variety of offense that Duke has, gives me a little bit more confidence. What prevents me from thinking that they could win a championship? I think Carolina could win it, possibly. Not likely, but possibly. But I don't think Duke can, because Carolina can protect the rim. Duke can't. But if you're asking me who goes farther, I think Duke probably does. But again, it all comes down to draw. There's somebody out there who takes advantage of Duke's inability or weakness at protecting the rim. We saw Duke go down to Pitt go down to Cameron and take advantage of that a few weeks ago. So we saw, to a lesser extent, Wake do it on Saturday. So we know it's possible for really good, solid teams to do that. But I do like Duke's offense as much as nearly anybody's in the country.
We're talking with Mike DeCourcy of the Sporting News. Mike, you mentioned Filipowski, so I've got to bring up the court storming issue. Obviously, it's become a much more, I guess, hot button topic here between Caitlin Clark and Kyle Filipowski, both kind of having incidents this season. Is there a good way in your mind to either prevent this from happening? Kind of agrees, like, hey, this isn't ideal, but what's the solution?
Well, I know that it makes me, a get off my lawn guy, but look, I go to games. I'm not just a sports journalist. I go to games all the time. I pay for my seat, and I am entitled to celebrate at my seat, if my team happens to win. And I don't know that I'm entitled to celebrate there until 3 a.m., but I mean, I think a reasonable amount of time to celebrate, and maybe, but I'm not entitled to be on the floor. You're not. They don't even show guys or ladies who run onto the field now on television to discourage the practice. But then we encourage the practice by showing on television the court storms. I don't get that. I don't think it's an essential part of the college basketball experience. And I say that because I've been to Allen Fieldhouse and on multiple occasions, and for me, Allen Fieldhouse is as good a place to go as there is to watch a basketball game. It's the best. And so, like, they don't storm there ever. I would bet you that, like, they haven't stormed there since Fog Allen was coaching himself. And yet it's magical. I don't remember a court storm at Purdue. Mackey Arena is phenomenal to be at. So I just don't think it's necessary for college basketball to be wonderful, or for the students to have a wonderful time. I think they're having a wonderful time in Fog Allen in their student section as much as anybody in the country. It's just kind of become this habit thing, kind of like the handshake line, the thing we do. And it's not, there's not really any significance to it other than this is my shot to get on TV and take a selfie and put it on Instagram. And I just don't think that's an essential part of the college basketball experience. I think the players are much more an important part of the college basketball experience, them being healthy and on the floor, whether it's Caitlin Clark, Kyle Filipowski, or anybody else.
Mm. Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News. Mike, we appreciate your time as always, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
That's Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News. You can also find him on Big Ten Network as a studio analyst and his brackets on foxsports.com.
Brackets?
I agree with him in general. I don't know how to stop it.
Yeah, I'm consistent because I said this with Kate and Clark, and I believe this with I've seen all the angles, and I was surprised that the ACC network was the one that first released the over.
You think he flopped a little bit?
It doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because I always just try to put myself in that situation, right?
Sure.
Like if that was me and
as the player, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And somebody's coming towards me,
mm-hmm.
my natural response would be to
kind of bow up a little bit.
I would probably use my hands. Maybe if I lean back, like my leg may come out.
I'd probably do a little forearm to keep my distance.
Yeah, I just don't want to get into the habit of critiquing that. Like just the same thing I said about Caitlin Clark. Like, well, you may say she was hit this hard or not hit that hard.
That doesn't
Do
matter.
I think both people were trying to avoid said player? 100% I do.
Yeah.
I think both in Columbus and at Wake, I think they were trying to go around.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is how did we get here?
Yeah, I guess
so. I'm kind of anti. I want to make sure that it doesn't happen. You don't
want to be in that scenario in the first place.
Yeah, I don't care about the specifics necessarily.
Well, I guess the specifics are important to me because if we're trying to get something to stop, we need to know how that happens, right? And
access, it's pretty easy.
No, but when you're talking about a certain number of students versus a certain number of security guards, there's a practical thing there that the numbers don't add up.
Oh, you could put protocol in place.
In what? Like what sense?
I don't know. You want them to move or?
You want who to move? The students?
Yeah.
To where? Where do you want to move them to?
So, like, you don't think? Why don't more people have access to the field at sporting events?
I'm not saying they should have access.
No. Why do you think you act like it's a numbers or proximity thing? Like, why do you think more sporting events don't have fans that can access the field? It's called security.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so that's where you start.
So you just want more security?
Do you have any other option?
No, I get it. I'm just saying you're talking about a lot of people. Like you're having to
is 8 grade. You know, a perfect example. We'll get to it on the other end. I'll tell you what Coach Rule did.
More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.